I knew we were going to talk about this, so I brought the letter that Jim Carrey wrote to me a couple of years ago. Hang on a second. Let me
Yeah.
really over here and grab this. All right, here I got it right here. I brought it with me.
Jerry, don't get barbecue sauce on that.
No, you're right. I mean, look at this. Look at this piece of paper. This is like that. It's like gold parchment paper. Very special.
Very nice.
This letter here. Anyway, and I've never shared this with anybody. Nobody knows about this. Or actually, the actual wording of what he wrote. I've told people that, that I heard from him since the original movie. But this was like maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. I get a call. I mean, I hadn't heard anything from Jim Carrey since the filming of the movie, 17 or 18 years ago or anything like that. So all of a sudden, a couple years ago, out of the blue, I get a call, and I thought this was maybe a joke. I get a call from Jim Carrey's secretary out in California. He said, "Mr. Lawler?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "This is, I'm secretary for Jim Carrey, and Mr. Carrey has something that he would like to send you, and I just want to call and get your mailing address." And I said, "Jim Carrey's got something he wants to send me?" I said, "What is it?" And she said, "Oh, I can't tell you. It's a surprise." Yeah, and I'm like, what in the world? So anyway, I give her my mailing address, and that was it. We hang up. And a few days later, I get this box in the mail. And I open it up, and the first thing on top of the box is this letter from Jim. And it says, "Your Royal Highness." Yeah, that's the way he starts this thing off, right? Now, to preface this, I don't know if you remember in the movie when we did the wrestling scenes, they had made this costume for me that sort of resembled one of the ones that I guess they just looked at the footage of what Jim and I wore that night or what Andy and I wore that night at the actual match, and so they tried to copy this wrestling robe that I had on, and they did a good job. I mean, it was just big ornate robe that sort of looked like it was inspired by what Kiss would wear on stage. And so anyway, apparently the first thing that I kind of figured out when I'm reading this letter is somebody gave him or sent him that wrestling outfit, that robe. I didn't get to take it back with me after we did the filming. I never saw it again. It just stayed in the wardrobe or whatever. And apparently somebody gave it to him. And I deduced from reading this that maybe he thought I sent it to him, is the reason that he was responding with this. Or I don't know how he got it, but obviously he got it, because here's what he said. He said, "Your Royal Highness, your wrestling outfit is absolutely the greatest gift anybody has ever sent me. To have that piece of memorabilia from the most avant-garde moment in comedy history is a real thrill for me. Working with you was both an honor and an odyssey. I truly felt that Andy was still in charge, and I hope you'll accept this modest gift in return. I know you've done some music, so I wanted to share some treasures I found in my record collection." And I'm reading this, and then I look in the box, and here's like 10 old vinyl albums, record albums, right? And they're all done by wrestlers. There's like an album by Antonio Rocco that had to come from like maybe in the 50s or 60s, the guy that wrestled barefoot up there in New York, right?
Yeah.
Okay, it's an album that it's all these albums that wrestlers had done for one reason or other. Sweet Daddy Siki, the first WWF wrestling music album with Hulk Hogan on the cover. I mean, just I don't know, about 10 different albums that I had never seen or heard before, except for the WWF one, was in this box. And so I'm expecting something really cool, and all of a sudden I see these old wrestling albums, and I thought, oh brother. He said, but and then he goes on. He said, but seriously, that was way beyond generous. So I mean, I think he's going back now about talking about the robe, that I wore out there, and I think he thinks that I thought that I sent it to him. He said, but seriously, that was way beyond generous. And if you're ever in LA, please don't hesitate to call. I have a box at the Staples Center for basketball, hockey, and special events, and I'd love for you to be my guest. Hail to the king, your loyal subject. And then it's personally signed Jim Carrey.
That's amazing, King.
So, yeah, it is kind of amazing. But then, you hear this. I have a box at the Staples Center for basketball, hockey, and special events, and I'd love for you to be my guest. But in typical Jim Carrey fashion, he did not include a way to get back in touch with him to line up being his guest or to, it was just this box and letter with no return address or anything like that where I could, get in touch with him to come and be his guest at the Staples Center. But yeah, I just thought that was kind of weird.
Do you have the phone number for the secretary, the caller ID?
No.
Wow.
No.
Well, Jim Carrey, if you're listening, Jerry Lawler wants to be your guest. Oh, got a waffle fry in you.
Yeah, wow, excuse me. You're right, I do. I'm still waiting on that invite to be in your box at the Staples Center.
Well, now that Jim knows, if he listens to this, and people,
are you kidding me? Do you think Jim Carrey listens to this podcast?
No, he doesn't. But I'm saying if word gets
did you see how many people with Jim Carrey? He's got like 12 million followers on Twitter. Do you see how many people he follows?
One.
I
think his daughter?
I don't know. I think that probably he doesn't even do his Twitter account. A lot of stars don't really do their own Twitter account.
Okay, well, if word gets back to Jim that, okay, you did not send this robe to him, is the offer rescinded then for the press box, for the box seat?
No, I don't know. No, it shouldn't be because he got the robe one way or the other. So
yeah.
And I think it was my understanding that it was supposed to be my robe, that I was supposed to get to keep the robe after the filming of the movie, because it was made just for me for that role. So anyway, but he wound up with it.
Well, that's great that he wrote a person. You don't see that very often. Maybe a call that says thank you, but a personalized letter. Was it handwritten or typed?
Well, it's typed on this awesome. This parchment paper, gold parchment paper. But then, of course, it's his signature. He signed the whole thing. But I mean, to have a piece of memorabilia from the most avant-garde moment in comedy history. Now, what he's talking about, he's not talking about the movie itself. Right. He's talking about the deal that me and Andy Kaufman did as being the most avant-garde moment in comedy history.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, King. I mean, it's Lawler versus Kaufman. The real feud will stand the test of time, and we talked about it during our podcast series. Is that everybody, they may not know who Jerry Lawler is. After that, if they don't watch wrestling, but it bridged the gap between Hollywood and professional wrestling that has lived on even to today with WWE and all the Hollywood stuff they do during WrestleMania or throughout the year.
Sure.
You started that, King.
Now, let me ask you this. What do you think he meant? I've looked at this a bunch of times, and I've tried to figure out what he meant by this next sentence when he said, working with you was both an honor and an odyssey.
Honor and, well, obviously, it's a compliment. Obviously.
Yeah, but what did he? Why was it an odyssey? What does that even mean?
It's a long wandering or voyage, usually marked by many changes of fortune. Jim Carrey is a very spiritual man. The other definition is a spiritual wandering or quest.
Yeah.
So maybe So that's a very very good compliment.
Well, you know what? I swear to you, I still believe this in my heart that him doing this movie back in that time, 1999 or 2000 or whatever. I don't believe that Jim Carrey was a spiritual man before that. I believe that he was Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, Grinch, all of those people rolled into one. And doing this movie and becoming Andy Kaufman had such an impact on him. Then I believe after that he became the spiritual person that he has remained to this day. And I think that's when he started his odyssey, was during the filming of this movie. And I really believe it changed his whole life. I mean, he's into transcendental meditation now because Andy was. And except Andy at the time didn't take it to the weird level that Jim Carrey has.
That's amazing. Yeah, this you can tell in the documentary with the film at the end when Jim is talking about his life and how he is now, and it just this movie really had a big effect on him long term, even after he kind of killed off the Andy Kaufman character. After the movie was commenced, it's a really interesting film if you haven't seen it, people.
Yeah, it really is. I'm proud to be a part of it. And it was financially rewarding for me to be a part of it too. That's another story that I can't tell. I'm contractually obligated not to tell about that part.
But still, it's a great documentary. If you guys want to watch it, it's on Netflix. Just a great film. And just as someone who watched the film when it came out, because of Jerry the King Lawler, it's very interesting to see all the behind the scenes footage. Not even with the parts with you, King, but just overall, how he really sold and really was into the character so much through the whole process. Just amazing. Right. Jim Carrey.
And for so many people that I personally had, and I know a lot of people had wondered, what happened to the Ace Ventura? What happened to the Grinch guy? What happened to Jim Carrey over the years? He became almost like a recluse. And if you see, when you see him, you'll see this long beard and totally looking nothing like Ace Ventura at all, and he's just becomes this serious, it's like a total transformation. It's not like the Jim Carrey that anybody, I think, remembers from the movie screens.
All right. That was a long answer to one birthday wish.
Oh, it sure was.
But no, it was great. A lot of emails we've come in or tweets, they want to know about Jim and Andy. And we talked about it a little bit last week, but after myself. And
I've never read that letter to anybody. So this is the first today on the podcast.
Well, I feel all our listeners are treated. So on your birthday, you're giving us a treat.